Good morning, everybody. Okay, so we are at the bottom of 3B, three lines from the bottom at the two dots. Okay. Tanarabanan. So we were discussing, who can do shchita, who's eligible, chachila, b'diavad, etc. Rabbi Stat, shchitas kuti muteras. If a kuti, which is a forced conversion, a class of forced conversions, gerei arayos, those who converted out of fear of being attacked by lions, so they were not considered, it wasn't considered a reliable conversion in various ways. Muteris, those people can do shchita b'mezvarim. When does that apply? Kish Yisrael Amel al Gabav, if they're being supervised by a Jew. But if the shchita already took place and then the rabbi came over and it's done already, so what do? You do a test. You cut off a piece of the meat and you give it to the kuti himself. Acholo, if he eats it, mutar lecho mishchitaso. So if he eats it, then you know it's kosher. And he did the shchita. So if he won't even eat it, then you know it's not kosher. Kayotze bo matzabiado. Similarly, if you found a kuti with a hamburger in his hand, dekuria shel tziparim, or a line of a string of birds that have already been slaughtered. Cut off the head of one of them, give it to him to eat. So if he eats it, it's fine. So if he doesn't eat it, then it's not. Abaye daik meresha. Okay, so how do you get Abaye and Rava's view? Abaye daik meresha. Abaye says he gets his. The Gemara will spell this out. And Rava daik misefa. Rava gets it from the end. Abaye daik meresha. What does Abaye get from the beginning of this brisa? Tamad Yisrael Amad al Gabav. Why is it okay to eat the meat? Because he's being supervised during the shechita. Yotze v'nichnas lo. But that implies a full supervision, watching the whole time. But the idea of Yosef Nichnas, that you could come at any time, you go in, you go out, and he's afraid you might, you assume that he figures you could come in at any time, that Abaye would not allow.
Why is that? Isn't that the principle the OU uses?
Right. Right, of course. So we have. I think there are different circumstances. Depends if it's meat, not meat, and. But we had in the Mishnah a whole variety of views, and Abaye's view was it has to be Yisrael Amid al Gabav, it has to be a Mashgiach Tmidi. Rava Daik Misefa. Rava gets from the end of the Mishnah of the Brisa. Tama the Bo Maso Shashachat. Why is it no good? Because why do you have to do the test? Because it's already the shechita has already been done before you came to supervise. But the Yosef V'nichnas is a middle case, so that would be okay. So in other words, Yosef Nichnas is a middle case, and Abaye validates it, and Rava does not. Well, Abaye kasha seifa. Well, so okay, so now let's look at the opposite views. Why does Abaye not agree with Rava? Can't you infer from the seifa, that from the end of the brisa, that the only thing that makes it bad is if the shechita has already been done, but does not imply Yosef Nichnas is okay? Amalach, he would tell you Yosef Nichnas name ba umatzau correlate. No, Yosef Nichnas is also a type of. It's under the category of he already found the meat shechted. Well, Rava kasha reisha, and Rava, you would say, well, isn't Abaye right? Doesn't the beginning of the brisa say that you have to have mashgiach tamidi, right? Amarlach, he would say, Yosef Nichnas nami kamen al gabav dami. No, Yosef Nichnas is as good as mashgiach tamidi.
What is the maskana here?
It's a machokas.
Oh,
So you don't expect me throughout the course of Chullin to be able to determine which is what's the practical halacha in a certain case. That's that requires someone with greater expertise and knowledge of the Rishonim than I can offer.
I'm not an expert on this, but I have noticed that the cafeterias at Weiler Hospital and at Einstein, the mashgiach leaves from time to time, for instance, to go to Minions.
Uh-huh. Okay.
and comes back. So they apparently take this leave and come back
Yeah.
seriously.
And do you know under what circumstances is a mashgiach tamidi ever required, or is that just a higher standard that they like to advertise?
I think that Mashgiach Tamidi, as I just described, is required for meat and for nothing else.
Uh-huh. Okay.
There's certainly there are lots of restaurants that do not have Mashgiach Tamidi.
Of
But
course.
but I think that all of the meat restaurants I'm aware of either are owned by an observant Jew or have a Mashgiach Tamidi.
Okay. Okay. The second part of the brisa was this string of dead birds. Am I? So, so you have. So why are you assuming? The Gemara is asking. Why are you assuming that the shlita of one is the same as the shlita of all the other ones? All right. Leichush dilma hai hu to have a shachit shaper. Maybe like he sees you take the first bird on the string, and the guy knows, oh, that one I did right. Oh, I'm fine to eat that, but that doesn't say anything about the rest of them. Each one has its separate shlita. Amar Menashe. B'machnisan tachas knafav. We're talking about where where you hide them from him. He doesn't know which one you're giving. You put it under your coat, take out one of the birds, so he doesn't know which one it was. So if he eats it, that means that all the birds were good. But maybe like he can recognize the bird's head. Like maybe there was some kind of there was some kind of simon on the one kosher bird, and he sees that this is the one. So that doesn't say anything about the other ones. Amar Misharshia de mimasmes le masmuse. He that when you give it to him, you make it unrecognizable. Basically, you crush it or something. So even though you're giving him from one of the birds, you can't tell. He wouldn't be able to tell which one it was if there was some kind of simon. Now, Gemara asks a general question. Maybe the kutim. So fine, they understand. We understand that they accept shchita. But maybe they hold that it doesn't apply to birds. So like the fact that he eats the bird doesn't mean now we hold that the birds do need shchita, but maybe the kuti is eating it because he holds birds don't need shchita, so he doesn't care how the shchita went. So Gemara says, "Utamech shehia derasa chalada hagrama v'ikur miksivan." Well, there's all kinds of other details that the kutim don't accept. These details of shchita. Was there a delay? Was it one motion, etc. So, like you can't even, according to that, you can't even rely on the kuti for shchita of an animal. Like if we're going to say the kutim are reliable to do shchita, then we're accepting basically the whole process. We're saying that they accept shchita in general, so we're giving them credibility for shchita for birds as well. Okay. But the Gemara questions this, like, why are we allowing them credibility in something that's not explicitly written in the Torah? Tanaihi, because that idea is a machlokes Tanaim. The Tanya we have brisa. Matzah's kuti muteras. You can eat the matzah prepared by a kuti. Because they have Pesach too, right? So and they also believe in not eating chametz and how to make matzah, so it's fine. And you can eat it on Pesach at the Seder. Rabbi Eliezer says no. Because they don't know all the details, right? They're not so particular like we are. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer, Kol mitzvah shehachziku bakusim, any mitzvah that they have accepted, Harbe Medakni Yosem Yisrael, they're even more firm than us, right? They like you can rely on them even more than a regular Jew. So Amar, we said matzah kuti muteras v'yodam yosef v'dechavos of Pesach. Tanakama says you can eat a kuti's matzah on Pesach. Pshita, obviously, like if it's like if you can eat the matzah, you can certainly use it on for the Seder. right? Maybe they're not. What's the difference between regular matzah that you eat all of Pesach and matzah you eat in Seder? It has to be, you have to have ushmartem matzah. So it has to be shmura from Shas Ktsira, from the time it's harvested. It has to be watched to make sure it doesn't become chametz, doesn't come into contact with water or whatever. So I might have thought that, yeah, they know how to make matzah, but they don't know how to make matzah's mitzvah. They don't know how to make the matzah for the Seder because they don't buy the ushmartem matzahs kamashmal. And it tells you no that they actually do. And not only can you eat their regular matzah, you can eat their shmur matzah.
We hold that a Jew in general has to be involved in every aspect of making a matzah, like we do with wine. Do we say that by a Jew? Especially shmura matzah, or can non-Jews make them, and Jews do supervise in general?
Well, there's another issue of maybe lishma for the Seder matzah, but for regular matzah, that was actually I think that was part of the debate when machine matzahs were first invented. There was a big debate about that. But
We decided the answer was just okay.
yes, right.
Yeah.
We do eat machine matzah, as you know.
And we have machine make shemura matzah.
Right, but that requires, I think, a little more, someone operating the machinery or whatever to have intention.
Well, there was a lot of debate about that machine matzah when the 1800, what was it?
Yeah, it was actually a very interesting debate because one side of it was that it's a value also that people should be able to afford matzah, right? Machine matzah is a lot cheaper.
Yeah, so that the same issue comes up in general with cooking, because a Jew has to be involved in the cooking of most foods, and Ashkenazim hold simply lighting the pilot light is sufficient.
Right. Yeah. Next part of the Rashi, Rabbi Elazar also Eliezer doesn't give the Kuti credibility because they don't. He says they're not as detailed. They're not familiar with all the halachos. Kasavar lo b'ki b'shimur. So regarding matzah, he would say, yeah, that's the detail of shmura. They don't buy that, or they don't buy into that. And Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer Kol Mitzvah Shechzik Bachutim Harbe Medaktekin Ba Yoser Yisrael. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says they're more firm than us. Hainu Tanakama. So what's the outcome? The result is the same as the Tanakama, right? That what's the difference practically if they're as particular as us or more particular than us? The difference would be if there's something that a detail that's written in the Torah and we don't know what their attitude is. Tanakama Savar, the Tanakama holds Keva Diksiva, Afagav Zikuba. Even since it's written in the Torah, you can rely on them, even though we don't know that they accepted this detail. If they accept it, then yes, then they're more from than us, or as from, more from. But if we don't know that they've accepted it, then you can't rely on them. So Gemara says, no, that can't be it. That's not what Rishon Gamliel says. He says any mitzvah that they accepted. So he should have said if they've accepted it. Eli Kabinayu have another view of the distinction. Something that's not written, right? It's a little more obscure. Maybe it's Halacha Moshe Sinai or something like that. V'achzikuba, and they did accept it. Tanakama Savar Kevin L'Ksiva Avagav Dachzikuba Name Lo. The Tanakama says, it depends on if it's a detail written in the Torah. Then they accept it, and if it's not written in the Torah, even if they're said to have accepted it, we don't rely on that. Rashum Gamliel Savar Kevin Dachzuk. No, it's like they're so firm. If they accept something, they're going to keep it. It doesn't matter if it's written explicitly or not. Okay.
How do we know that? We asked them?
That was the rabbi's view. They clearly have. There was clearly some distance between them because it's like it depends if we know that they accepted it. It sounds like they're not, like they can't go and ask, because then they would say, just go ask them. Is this something that you guys do? Is this in your Shulchan Aruch? But it seems a little more obscure than that. And I guess you can't ask the individual kuti that you're dealing with because he might be dishonest with you. So it
Exactly.
has to depend on, do we know that this is their religion? That this is how they practice.
I don't
Someone
know
that,
what it's like at the time of the Talmud, but today they are very open about all of the aspects of their religion, and they even had a documentary film
Mm-hmm.
and a coffee table volume. So we completely understand what they're doing today,
Yeah.
and there are fewer than 1,000 of them. So they only have two synagogues in the entire world, and
You're
they
talking
invite,
about the
yeah,
Samaritans, something like that?
and they even welcome people to watch their Korban Pesach sacrifices.
Mm-hmm.
I grew
So
up in a community near Samaritan, a Samaritan community where I grew up in Michigan. And
Oh,
every
yeah?
year they would have the Pesach. They would roast the Korban Pesach. Literally, they would take
No
it,
kidding.
get a lamb and roast it literally in outsiders.
Hmm. Okay. I didn't know they had diaspora communities.
I was unaware they had a diaspora. There are two synagogues in the land of Israel, one in outside of Nablus and one in Holon.
Well, this is
Hmm.
in Michigan.
Yeah. Learn
You're
something
not
new today.
you're not confusing with the Karites?
No, no, no. They call themselves Samaritans. I know
Oh,
that. No.
Okay.
interesting. I wonder whether they're in touch with the people ones in the land of Israel.
Gufa, we said before, Amar Rava, Yisrael, Mumar, Ochel Nevelos L'Teyavon. Bodek Sakim V'nosin Lo. If you have an apostate Jew who what is his apostasy? I don't know if that's the right word, apostasy, but his the area in which he is not halachic is that he eats non-kosher when he's hungry, when he wants it, right? It's like, no, he doesn't do it dafka, he doesn't do it lahachis. Um, he doesn't do it out of spite, but he does it because he likes Big Macs. So that person, you can check the knife, make sure the knife is good for shchita, and give it to him for shchita. So you can eat it. My tama. Why is the shchita good? Kevin dika tera v'isura. Lo shavik hatera v'isura. Because he's not gonna, if it's possible to eat kosher, he'll eat kosher. So we don't assume he's going to mess up the shchita. If he has the right knife, and he can do the shchita, so then he does it. We assume he's doing it right. Where it says kilo badaknami, so what does he have to check the knife for? Like if you're going to say he'll make it kosher if he can, so wouldn't he also check the knife? So mitrach lo tarach, no, that's too much trouble, right? It's like you'd have to cross the street to buy a kosher burger. That's too much trouble. You eat the Big Mac. Amalei Rabban Rava, so the rabbi said to Rava, Tanya de Messiah, here's a supporting brisa. Chemson shel ovrei avera, the chametz of people who keep their chametz on Pesach. Uh, Achara Pesach, can you eat that after Pesach? Chametz shavra Pesach mutar miyad. That's permissible right away. Mipnei shehein machlifin, because after Pesach they'll exchange their chametz for chametz that was not Avraham Pesach. In other words, belonged to a non-Jew. Um, so in other words, if it's possible for them to do it right, they'll do it right. So they thought as follows: Hamani, whose opinion is this? Rabbi Yehuda, must be Rabbi Yehuda. The Amar Chametz Achar Pesach Daraisa. He says that it's a Isur Daraisa Torah law not to eat chametz that has been in the possession of a Jew during Pesach. Even after Pesach, and the Brisa says, why can you eat this? Because they'll exchange it for permissible chametz. So we see that if they have um, um, we rely on this idea that if he has a possibility to do it right, he'll do it right, even with the doraisa. So Gemara says, "Mimai, wait a minute. Dilma Rabbi Shimon, you could say that this brisa about chametz is like Rabbi Shimon. Diamar chametz achar pesach rabbanan. He said it's only a rabbinic prohibition to eat chametz that was owned by you or a Jew during Pesach. V'chi mechilinan. When are we going to say you can rely on this guy who keeps chametz on Pesach b'drabanan? That's only because it's rabbinic. But But a case like kosher meat, right, which is doraisa, maybe we wouldn't say that you can rely on somebody who doesn't keep kosher himself. So Gemara says v'tari navi Rabbi Shimon. So the brisa could even be Rabbi Shimon. Mikatane shani omer hechalifu. Do we say that I assume that they switched the chametz for permissible chametz? Mipnei shemachlifin katani. No, the language is because they do it, right? Devadai machlifin. That's where you know that they switched the chametz for permissible chametz. That's when you can buy their chametz. But we're not going to make that assumption. Uma midrabanan lo shavi kater v'yachlisor. So if for a drabanan, according to Rabbi Shimon, like chametz shavar Pesach, we're not going to say that we assume that they did it right. So certainly, but deraisa lo kosher. So a deraisa of shchita, we're not going to assume that. Okay. Yes. Maybe there's.
We know what the source. The one who the man Domer brings it the right. I'm thinking, what would be his source? I'm not aware that it is the right that chametz shalav ala pesach asur mimina Torah.
Well, here I can say pretty confidently that we hold it's only the Rabbanan.
That's correct.
So we hold like Rabbi Shimon, but yeah, the Gemara quotes the brisa. Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is it's the brisa.
Well, but he doesn't quote a source.
Right. I mean, other than saying it's Rabbi Yehuda's view, but he doesn't explain why.
Exactly, because often we will say that when the Gemara brings it, it'll bring a pasuk somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's in the Gemara in Pesachim, according to the footnote here. Pesachim Kaf Ches is where this machlokus is recorded. So presumably Rabbi Yehuda explains his reasoning there. Here's another brisa that supports Rava. Hakol shachtin. Anybody can do shchita. Afilu kuti, afilu arel, even a uncircumcised Jew. Afilu Yisrael mumar, even a translate here, renegade Jew. That's a good word. Hi arel hechidami. What kind of uncircumcised Jew are we talking about? Ilema mesu echav machmas mila. If you say that he had an exemption, right? That he has a familial problem. His brother is predeceased him because of Mila. Then you're not supposed to give him Mila because it's life threatening. So Hayisrael Maliyahu, but that's like I mean, he may. So there may be specific things he can't do. Like if I'm not mistaken, he can't bring a korban Pesach. But for every other in every other respect, he's considered a full-fledged Jew. So why should his shechita? Of course, his shechita is good. No, so we must be talking about an uncircumcised person who did it on purpose, right? He has no exemption. And the Tana must hold echad the fact that we say you can eat from a shechita means that so he didn't do bris milah. That's a problem, but it doesn't mean he doesn't keep kosher. We can't imply one from the other.
But what's the case that we say that he did it dafka because he didn't want to? He say he's a baby. Does he have? Is he a bar
when you get older, I mean, a baby can't do shchita either. Clearly, we're talking about an adult, right? Although we did talk about chereshot of a katan, but presumably he's at an age where he could have decided to go ahead and get a bris milah, and he did not.
Yeah.
So Ema Seifa, what about the end of the brisa? Afilu Yisrael Mumar, even a renegade Jew. What kind of non-halachic status, what kind of attitude does he have towards halachic things? If it's for something other than shchita, then hainu mumar larelu. So same reasoning applies. Like, what's the difference between someone who is a mumar la to an RL that we already understood as a mumar larelus, or a mumar l'davar acher, that's something else other than shchita. Elulav mumar la'osa davar. So we must be talking about a Jew who doesn't accept shchita, right? Who eats non-kosher, v'chidarava, and that accords with Rava that says that that person, if you give him the knife, a kosher knife, then it's fine. Let him do shchita. So Gemara says, lo, not necessarily. Lo. Maybe this brisa could be interpreted as understanding that if he's a mumar in that he doesn't eat kosher himself, that then Abaye could be right that we don't accept his shchita. My tama kevan de dashbe, since he regularly eats non-kosher, so he doesn't consider it a mitzvah anymore. It's something that he doesn't think much of, and so he wouldn't necessarily do the shechita properly. In other words, he'll do mitzvahs properly in general, but not something that he habitually doesn't comply with. So he may consider that a non-starter. Ella mumar lavos kochavim. So what is the Bryce talking about? Someone who is an idol worshiper, Ravanan, like Ravanan said, Diam Ravanan, Amar Shmuel, Yisrael mumar lavos kochavim, mutar lechol b'shchitaso. If he may be a mumar for idol worship, but that doesn't make him ineligible to be trusted for other things such as shchita.
I actually had to ask a Rav once, correct the kashrut of a Meshikas Lubavitcher.
That's a problem for world travelers like yourself, right?
Yes. To my surprise, the answer was yes. And I actually was hosted by Meshikas Lubavitcher in Spain.
Okay. Where in Spain, might I add?
Madrid.
In Madrid, the downtown Chabad, Center City Chabad, or the outskirts?
Yeah.
I haven't been there before. We've been to Madrid a bunch of times. I only heard about that for the first time recently. It's actually near where we like to stay.
There's not a lot of Jewish life in Madrid.
Although, have you been to the Israeli restaurant, Barganzo?
No, they didn't. They didn't have an Israeli restaurant. They had two Moroccan restaurants.
There's near the downtown Chabad. There's a vegetarian or vegan certified kosher, like one of these upscale Israeli places. Is really very good. Kosher wines and everything.
That wasn't there back when I visited, but they had two Moroccan restaurants that had delicious food.
Okay, Gufa. Ravanan Shmuel. So we just said that Ravanan said Yisrael mumar levos kochavim mutar lechem mishchitaso. A Jew who worships idols, he can still do shchita. Shekem asinu b'Yoshafat melech Yehuda. We find the king Yehoshaphat shenana misudas Achav. He had dinner with Achav, King Achav. Shenamar vayizbach lo Achav tzon v'akar larov. Achav slaughtered a lot of cattle. V'lam asherimo, and the people that were with him, vayisiseu lalos el Ramos Gilad, and he enticed him to go up to Ramos Gilad and to join him. So v'dilma mizbach zebach, maybe mechol olachal, maybe he went to the dinner, but he ordered the fruit plate. Right? Maybe he didn't eat the meat. No, the Tanakh uses the word he enticed him. Right? He convinced him. How do you entice someone to go with you to dinner? You tell them it's going to be a really good dinner. We're going to have prime rib. So it sounds like the food was an important part of the occasion, and we can assume that he did eat from Achav's shchita. V'dilma midvarim. How do you know? Maybe he just would, maybe he said, "Come on, we'll spend time together. We'll have a nice meal together." He didn't specifically talk about the menu. No, that's the Gemara says that's not what you would word the word hasasa for just convincing. V'lo, is that right? V'aksiv ki sischa achicha. The parsha in the Torah that talks about someone enticing you to worship of Avodah Zarah. That's not about the prime rib. That's like somebody convincing you to, theologically to worship Avodah Zarah. But no, the Gemara says that also happens through food and drink. The pasuk in Eav, you enticed me against him to swallow him for no reason. So this is talking about enticing God, right? So God, you don't entice with food and drink. Lamal shani. Okay, so when you talk about enticing God, it's different. But a person, the way you convince somebody else, the way to a man's heart is through his stomach.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky. I think it's him that maybe, and certainly others who have said that it is permitted to attend a business meeting in a non-Jewish restaurant. So one goes for the conference and for the. I mean, I've attended many, but one doesn't necessarily feel compelled to eat the food there.
Right. So, there's clearly the way they got you to come was because of the lectures or the conference or whatever.
Right.
But that would not be what the Gemara is saying is you wouldn't use the word lahasis to entice someone. So, by using that word, the Gemara is trying to say that indicates you went for they're bringing you in for the food.
I have faced that issue on a regular basis for my entire career, and I simply don't eat. Usually, I order a Coca-Cola. There was one Mexican restaurant that the event was at, and the Coca-Cola was imported from Mexico, and there was no hechsher, so I sufficed with water. I later found out that Coca-Cola is perfectly kosher. Mexican Coca-Cola is perfectly kosher, but I had to go
for Pesach, perhaps, right? That they use the cane sugar for.
And it is made with real sugar, so it might be. But I had to go to Mexico City to find that out.
Do they use yellow caps in Mexico?
Well, they don't use corn syrup at all in Mexico to do soft drinks. They use real sugar. Yeah, the Mexican Coca-Cola bottles you find in bodegas in the Bronx, you can drink, even though they don't have sugar.
Okay.
But it's still, the Gemara doesn't say vayachlu. It says vayisitiu. It's still, it's
right.
sort of vague. It is vague here.
Right, but the Gemara is stating that when the Tanakh uses that word, it means through the use of food. That's the claim. Except if it refers to God, then obviously it's not. But the Gemara is not done. Vidilma mishta ashe. This is Charlie's strategy. Like maybe he went for the wine and not for the meat, right? Maybe he didn't eat the shchita. So Gemara says, "Ma'ishna shtia, diamrina mumar lavos kachavim lahav mumar lachol atarakula." So for wine, the wine would also have been usher, right? Because if you're saying that mumar lavos kachavim is not he's not suspected for other mitzvos. Achila name, but that would be the same for drink as well. So like you would have to say that eating and drinking has the same status in terms of reliability of the oved kachavim or of the mumar oved kachavim. Achihasha says Gemara says what you're comparing meat and wine. Shasiha stam yenon. So that is not like. It's not yayin nesach, right? It's stam yenam. It's like you don't know what his intention was with the wine. And at that time, in the time of the Tanakh, there was no problem with yayin with wine of the kachavim. That was a rabbinic thing later on. Aval achila, but shchita, right? Emalach mumar lavos kachavim having mumar l'chol tarakula. No, shchita was a rule already, right? So what's his idea that you're eating the shchita from this king who was an Oved of Azar, of Achav? So Gemara says, okay, fine. Ibai Sema, you could say, Lav Orche de Malcha Mishtiya B'Lomecha. You might say that a king is not going to go and just drink wine, right? A king is going to enjoy the whole meal. Ibai Sema, or you could say, Vayizbach Vayisiseu, B'Mehesiso Bezvicha. Maybe the idea was not that he's saying we're having great prime rib, but he said we're having great kosher prime rib. So in other words, how am I going to get him to come to the Suda? By providing kosher meat, kosher food. So that was so that way you have your cake and eat it too, right? You can use the word lahasis, right? That you're enticing someone through food. And how do you entice them through food? Well, you could say that Yoshio would never have eaten non-kosher food, so he enticed him by bringing in the meat from the
Meal
kosher butcher. Yeah.
Right, from a meal mart. But
Yeah.
what's the point of mixing the wine? The king wouldn't drink wine without meat. So what's the
No, so we're trying to say, look, you
the wine is
you're
kosher?
trying to prove yeah, maybe the wine was kosher. You're trying to prove that Yoshio ate at that Suda. He must have eaten the meat. So I was
Yehoshaphat.
saying, no, maybe he was only drinking the wine. Yeah, Yehoshaphat, sorry, not Yoshio. Yeah.
So he was drinking the wine, so the king brings wine to the meal.
No, the king, it's two kings, right? It's Achav invites Yehoshaphat to dinner, right?
Steak,
Uh-huh.
To what, sorry?
steak dinner,
To a steak dinner, steak and wine. Um,
ATE, like when Trump just toasted King
oh,
Charles.
state. Yes, a state dinner. Exactly. Yes, thank you. Um, so, yeah, and Yehoshaphat went. So can we prove from that it's okay to eat from Achav Shrita? So the answer is, first we tried to say, well, um, maybe he only drank the wine. So we did away with that. That didn't prove anything. And now we're saying maybe, he enticed him to come to dinner by telling him it was going to be kosher. So maybe even though he habitually would not have, generally speaking, you couldn't rely on Achav because he's Oved Avodah. But in this case, he got a mashgiach because he wanted Yehoshaphat to come. So we're not done yet. Vilma Ovadia Zabach. How do you know that Achav was the shochet? Right? Like maybe he had from people on his staff. He had Ovadia, right? That Ovadia was the one that Elio appeared to, and he said, like, you want me to go and tell Achav that you're alive? He's going to kill me, right? He says, but and you know that I'm from, right? So maybe Ovadia was in charge of the kitchen. So Larov Ksiv, no, there was a lot of shechita going on there. There were a lot of cattle being slaughtered. Avadia lo Isapek, like Avadia was the only frum guy there. He wouldn't have been enough. It was all Achav's, and maybe I guess it means not Achav personally, but Achav's servants presumably were, except for Avadia, presumably were all the same Odei Avodah Zarah.
So Avadia could serve as the mashgiach. He wouldn't have to slaughter them all himself, right?
Right, he would. That's what we're saying. Like there was a lot of meat there. Ovadia couldn't have been the only
Right,
shot.
but wouldn't that be if he's the mashgiach and he watches other
Oh,
people? Then
okay.
wouldn't
So
it
say
be
we'll have to stop
acceptable
him.
then?
Well, well, either way, I mean, you could say that there was too much going on there for one mashgiach. But the other question is, really, was Ovadia the only one? Vidilma Shivas Alafim Zavuach. There were Dichsivi Sharti B'Yisrael Shivas Alafim Kol Abrikayim Asher Lo Kar Labal. It says that I'll leave over 7,000 non-idol worshippers. So maybe they're the ones in charge of the kitchen. There's certainly plenty of people that could have done shechita properly, that were not of the Avodah Zarah and could have done a shechita. Tamuro havamitamre meizevel. No, they're not going to reveal themselves, right? They were all in hiding, these 7,000 people, because they were afraid that Zevel, Achav's queen, would execute them.
Right.
Vidilma gavre de Achav havu malu. Maybe, but still, the Gemara persists. Like, okay, so we don't know for sure that they were like who the 7,000 were, but still, maybe the butchers in the palace were from. Lo salkadatach. No, I don't think so. Dichsiv Moshel Makshiv al Devar Sheker v'chol Mashar Severshaim. If a leader, if a ruler listens to Sheker, to falsehood, then all of his servants are wicked. Okay, so in other words, the people on the staff are going to be the ones that he's in tune with. And if he's Oved Avodah Zarah, the people on his staff are going to be Oved Avodah Zarah. V'dilma Gavri Yoshafat Nami Lahavu Malu. Maybe. Maybe Yoshafat's men were also not from Zavuach Gavre da Achav, Achol Gavre de Yoshafat, Zavuach Avadia Achol Yoshafat. maybe, okay, so we've established that there was at least one from person that was Ovadia. So, all right, so there was too many cattle being slaughtered to serve the whole dinner, right? But maybe, Ovadia did shchita on one sheep, and that's what Yehoshaphat ate from. No, don't think so. Mida Moshel Makshiv al Devar Sheker Chol Mashar Shel Rishayim, from the pasuk we just quoted, that all the staff is going to be Rishayim. Hol Dvar Emes Mashar Shel Tzadikim. Um, so the converse is also true, that Yehoshaphat, who was a tzaddik, who was a righteous king, all of his people are going to be from also. So you can't say that the whole, like, so they were also eating from this feast. So you have to go back to the idea that all the meat had to be kosher. So don't tell me that, okay, Ovadia served Yehoshaphat and the other Ovdei Vodazara served everybody else. That wouldn't work, because Yehoshaphat's men were also from.
So Ovadia was, we have a Masorah now. Ovadia was he was kasher.
Yeah, that's
If
pretty
that's the
explicit.
case, then why did Izebel not have him killed?
I guess he was hiding, or he was concealing it.
No, but wait a second.
So
But
we know from the story of Eliyahu, of his encounter with Eliyahu. So we know that he was from, but Izebel may not have known. Maybe he was, maybe he was covering it up in public.
So what? So then part of the other 70 could have been working undercover as well.
Yeah, but we're saying the Gemara quotes that pasuk to tell you that can't be. Maybe Ovadia was an exception, right? I guess it allows for an exception, but don't tell me that all of his staff were all from, because that, if you have a wicked king, you can assume the staff is also wicked. But I guess you have a good point that you have to allow for an exception. So Ovadia was certainly on his staff, and yet we know Ovadia was from, so fine. So there can be an exception, but in general, you have to assume that all the shochtim there were all corrupt.
Sounds a little bit like the story of Yosef, where he was in Mitzrayim alone, and he kept the mitzvot, and he lived in an area of Avodah Zarah, and the Egyptian Mitzrayim, but he himself kept halakha.
Or what the Medrash says about Esther, same idea.
Right.
Or Daniel and his friends.
Daniel, that's right.
And that was typically about food.
Exactly, it was right. Okay. V'dilma zavuach gavrei diachav. So we just said, right? Dilma zavuach. Dilma zavuach gavrei diachav. Achal achav v'gavrei. Maybe what Achav slaughtered, that's what he ate. Zavuach the Gavri di Yoshafat, Yoshafat Gavri. Maybe Yoshafat brought his own mashkichim, right? Not to rely on Achav. They participated in making of the feast. They made themselves a kosher dinner, and Achav's men made themselves non-kosher dinner. So the Gemara says, "Lo hafa maflig nafshe minei." No, there's no indication that Yehoshaphat didn't trust Achav, right? It seems like they were, they were of one mind. They participated equally in this event anyway. And where do you get that from? Because the pasuk says, I'm like you. Like, basically, he said we're all together in this, right? We're all the same. Elameata kisusecha hachiname. He also, in that same pasuk, made an equivalence between the horses. So, like, horses aren't from, right? That's not what they're talking about. Elama the have asusecha to have asusai. What does it mean? It means our fate is the same. What happens to your horses will happen to my horses. We go into battle together, we'll suffer the same. We will have the same fate. So that's what it means also about the people. Like, if we go into battle together, our soldiers will have the same fate. Whatever happens to you and your people will happen to me and my people. So maybe there's another source for how they are, that Yehoshaphat was at one with Achav regarding halacha. Umelech Yisrael v'Yosef Melech Yehuda Yoshvi Mishal Kisa Mulubashim Begadim. They were both sitting there in their royal clothes. Begoren Pesach Shar Shomron, on the threshing floor at the gate of Shomron. My Goren, what kind of threshing floor? Elema Goren Mamash. We're talking about an actual threshing floor. Atu Shar Shomron Goren Hava. Like, that's not where you put a threshing floor, at the gate of the city. Ella Ki Goren means it's like the people sitting there were like. The space was shaped like a Goren. Ditnan, like we have in the Mishnah. Sanhedrin Haisa Kachatzi Goren Agula. The Sanhedrin was referred to as a shape of a half of a Goren. Kadeshi Uro and Zeza, so they could see each other, like they sat in a semicircle. So the Gemara actually accepts this, that yes, by saying that they were sitting there at the threshing floor, or sorry, at the gate of the city together, that indicates that they were like-minded when it came to things like Shlita. Okay, let's stop here for today and pick it up here tomorrow.
They were, but both of them were Jews, though, weren't they?
Oh yeah, absolutely, for sure. But Achav was a mumar lavodos kochavim. He was certainly an idol worshiper, but he was Jewish.
So he was over B'kol Torah Kula then, right? Isn't a mumar?
Well, that's exactly what we're discussing. Could you rely on the shechita, even though he was an oved avodah zarah? Maybe you could rely on the shechita. So that's kind of the discussion here, right? And we're trying to prove it from Yehoshaphat. Well, Yehoshaphat did, and we end up saying that yeah, indeed, Yehoshaphat did rely on him for shechita. So that indicates that you can rely on oved avodah zarah. A Jewish oved avodah zarah, a Jewish mumar avodah zarah, you can still rely on his shechita. If unless you know that he's also mumar l'shchita, but if the only fault that he has is that he's oved avodah zarah, otherwise he's a frum Jew. Otherwise, then you can rely on the shchita.
He's they call, I think, mumar l'te'avon. I've heard this expression.
Yeah, we mentioned that earlier. Yeah,
there are those who do. I heard
because they like Big Macs.
I've heard it in connection with profession. It does this for parnasa, mumar l'te'avon.
Right. Yeah, that's a similar thing. Right. And in other words, not because of a philosophical or theological reason. It's just like you have a need for whatever kind of need you have to be over this particular avera. But it doesn't mean that you're going to do other averas. Like if you have to work on Shabbos for a living, it doesn't mean that you're going to steal from somebody, or that you don't take a lulav on Sukkot or whatever.
You don't, or I know, or they keep kosher, but
right. Okay, we'll pick it up here tomorrow. Have a good day, everybody.